So good morning. Thank you for being here today. This is an exciting day. So since I've taken office, transparency, accountability, and urgency, those have been my top objectives during this very first month. 3 days ago, I announced a plan to improve transparency and accountability within our homelessness and housing systems through the creation of key performance indicators that we will use to track, report, and measure our progress and the work of our providers towards reducing homelessness. These are long overdue steps that will give the public new, accessible, consistent information, as well as new expectations around how we're serving those living on the streets and how we're spending vital taxpayer funds. Building on this transparency and accountability, today I'm announcing directives for how we'll meet the urgency of this moment, focusing on how the county will partner with the city and the state and building on the states of emergency they've both issued. We're pivoting so that we no longer move people 3 blocks. Instead, we're focusing on moving them into housing and support from there. First, this plan will establish a multi-agency coordinating group, similar to what has been established in Seattle, that will initially work to eliminate homelessness in a specific geographic area. Seattle has focused on its central city, and our plan is to do likewise and then open a secondary location in East County this calendar year. This will provide option support and a path back to housing. The goal of this model is to connect people directly into housing and stop the shuffle of moving people from one location to another as they're living outside. Second, our approach will accelerate the process of providing housing to those in this geographic area. We will have outreach workers, housing placement and stabilization workers dedicated to coordinating services for this population. We will then expand the areas served and build the capacity to serve more of the county. And this does not mean that we're going to stop working elsewhere in the county. That work will continue. Third, this plan will incorporate the pilot urban campground proposal that's currently funded by the city. This will be a by name system, and those awaiting housing or not ready for housing will be provided with options, including congregate shelters, Safe for Us village sites, and the city's proposed temporary alternative shelter sites. Most importantly for me, those residing in any of our shelter programs will be given the support they need and a path to move back into housing. Fourth, we will make better use of all of our shelters by focusing on housing placement. Key to this effort is the acceleration of people moving out of shelters and into housing. The funding we devote to this will help us limit the length of stay in all of our shelters, which is eliminating bottlenecks and increasing our ability to provide safe sleep options when people need them the most. We're also going to be leveraging the state's Medicaid 1115 waiver, which can help us to provide housing to those with behavioral health needs. We know that everyone is better off with a roof over their heads and the needed services available. As long as there are vacancies and rental units in the metro area, we should be able to move people into those units and help them stay there. We'll find them through landlords' incentives, guaranteed rent for a year, and wraparound services. But we need more landlords to step forward and provide those living on our streets with a safe space to stay. Again, we are offering incentives, guaranteed rental income, and services, and we hope that landlords will step up as they have in the past and continue to help us address this crisis. Our region has a lower poverty rate than Detroit. We have lower addiction rates than West Virginia, but we have far higher rates of homelessness than both of those because we have a severe shortage of affordable housing. The problem on our streets stems from that fact and that fact alone, and we should all understand this. The lack of housing impacts people at all income levels. So our funding models for this will benefit not only those living unsheltered, not only renters, not only homeowners, but everyone in our region. Lastly, we're asking our other housing partners, including the Portland Housing Bureau, nonprofit partners, and others, to prioritize empty or newly empty units for those living on the street. We can and must tackle this crisis, and I believe together with our renewed partnerships, focus, and commitment, we will. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the ongoing efforts of Multnomah County Board of working together on homelessness. Commissioner Myron has been leading the call to link our systems together and derive meaningful data to track our progress and determine what works. Commissioner Jayapal leads the charge to bring online systems to link those searching for housing with landlords, work that will continue and be critical in the next months. Commissioner Rosenbaum, after only 1 month in office, is quickly getting up to speed on our county systems, the needs of her district, and where we can do better. And Commissioner Stegman has been a steadfast champion in expanding our services in East County. By identifying shelter options and project turnkey sites, she is helping to ensure that we have the coordination and options we need in East County. My team has shared these directives with the mayor's office and our city colleagues, as well as the governor's office and Metro. We traveled with representatives from the governor's office, Mayor Wheeler's office, Commissioner Rubio's office, Commissioner Jayapal and her office, and Metro to Seattle 2 weeks ago to observe their multi-agency coordination system, see how it works, and ask questions. It was a trip that was enlightening and helpful in what I've detailed today. And I do want to thank our partners at the city, Metro, the governor's office, and those with HUD for their input in shaping these directives. We've also shared these directives with some of our providers, including the Welcome Home Coalition. I believe we have the support we need for the work I've outlined. These steps come after many hours of work by the Joint Office of Homeless Services and others. And I believe investments like this can help the city and the county to continue to collaborate constructive on homelessness and housing issues. This is a continuation and a next step in the partnership I've been committed to since taking office. So I thank you again for being here today, and with that, I'll take questions.
I know a lot of people are wondering how this will connect to the mayor's plan. Will the county help fund the supported camps as well as affordable housing?
So I was just on a panel with the mayor earlier today, and they're committed that we will, as the county does, be a supportive partner in making sure that the people at these campsites have access to services and have connections into housing. That is really the lane that the county thrives in and does the best on, and we want the city to have our support in that.
Commissioner, what happens if somebody doesn't want to move?
Yeah, so that was an exact question that we asked when we were up visiting in Seattle, because the real focus of this program is to connect people directly into housing and to be working with people on the ground on a very intensive way over a course of weeks to get them ready to move into housing. So sometimes that looks like helping someone get an ID card, helping someone get prepared to put in a rental application, all of these steps. There have been very few people who have not wanted to go into housing over the course of those weeks of intensive outreach, but it does happen. In those cases, we want to make sure that we are offering connections into our congregate shelters, all alternative shelters, some of the urban campsites, and to help people move into options. One of the key pieces of this program is that we are making sure that once we move people into housing, we want to make sure that they have the stability that they need to continue that path.
But I guess answering the question, what happens if somebody says, I'm not moving? They have a choice of options to do, and they will have to move at the end of that. And normally what has happened in the experience of Seattle is that people move. Most often they move into housing, sometimes they move into shelter. How does it though prevent people just from moving somewhere else? In other words, not just a few blocks if somebody's keeping an eye on that section, but just moving to another area to camp?
The part of the effort of having this intensive outreach and establishing a by name list for the people that are being engaged is to make sure that we know what's happening with them, what they need, and where they're going. And so all of the focus is really on connecting people into housing and into the services they need or they may need to be successful in housing. So that's what the focus is on. Most of the time, people gladly accept housing or the shelter that happens. According to Seattle, there's been very, very few people who have said no to any of the options that they had.
When would this actually start?
So we are engaging our partners and our providers in conversation. So work has been going on to prepare it for a while. So we will start figuring out what exactly the geographic areas we're going to start with immediately.
When we look at this plan for funding and a housing first approach, how would you respond to those who say there needs to be just as much of a focus on short-term solutions as long-term solutions?
The only real long-term solution to homelessness is getting someone in a home. And so that's what we're doing. We are making that connection immediately to help cut down the time it's taking people to get access to housing, to get services.
I will be very clear, we need landlords and providers to step up for this to be successful, because we know that while we don't have a zero vacancy rate, we do have a low one. So we are going to be working actively with housing acquisition to make those connections. But that is really the focus of the work. And instead of having somebody wait, the intensity and the resources being put there is to help break down those barriers.
Given that you'd have to rely on landlords, is there a plan of attack if landlords aren't cooperating or if enough landlords don't come to the table?
What we saw with Move in Multnomah was that there were a lot of landlords that stepped up and stepped into this space, knowing that they had connection to guaranteed rent, they had connections to services and a team to help support the person be successful in living there. So that's not an issue I'm worried about right now, but of course we'll be doing a lot of outreach and conversations with the landlords. It's also going to be, we're also going to need to rely on our affordable housing partners in order to provide spaces there. We know that some of the reasons people experience homelessness is economics, and those are probably people who would be best suited and thrive in a private apartment. There will be other people who will need more supportive services, and for that we want to make sure that they're getting connected with permanent supportive housing.
Just one more quick follow-up for you here. We know that part of the issue from advocates and people in the community is just a lack of housing. So how do you plan to get around that major hurdle?
Yeah, so again, it's being very targeted and specific in finding the units that are available. And it's also being as supportive as possible to the work that's happening through Governor Kotek and Mayor Wheeler's initiatives to get more housing built. We know ultimately that we are tens of thousands of units short here in the metro area. We need that, not just for people who are currently living unsheltered, but for everyone who's looking to find affordable housing.
Do you have some sense of how many people you're looking to shelter within the first year of starting this?
So we have a goal of about 300 people to get into housing through this program.
That seems really low.
Well, it's something that we want to have an achievable goal, and we're really focusing on a geographic area. I think we'll have a better sense of it when we really dig into the numbers of exactly how many people are going to be living in the area that we're working with.
But would it be something that starts this year, in the next few months? Or?
Yeah, it would be something that would be starting in the next few months, and we came up with that number based on what Seattle's goals are for the size of their population that they're working with, and kind of use that as our best model for what we're going to be doing here in Portland.
Are there lessons from Move in Multnomah that shaped this plan? Anything that changed because of that experience?
We need more money for the program because the need is great and the willingness to step up and provide housing is there.
And have you identified, are there current rentals identified that are open, current landlords identified that would partner with you at this moment?
So we have landlords that we worked with Move in Multnomah. Those will probably be the first people that we reach out for that, but the engagement with landlords is starting today.
So this 14 million that you're talking about, any idea how many people that would be able to move from tents to housing? I mean, how many people would actually be able to help?
Yeah, so that is a really good question. Like I said, we have an initial goal of moving the first 300 people into housing, but we also want to expand to the second site. So we're looking at using those resources to really not to provide support for people, to provide the landlords incentives. So those are the numbers we're working with right now.
So right now the 14 million is for 300 for the first group.
No, I'm sorry, that's for the first group, but we're still gonna be determining how many in total, but that's the number that we feel is a really solid commitment to make sure that we can set up this work, stabilize this work, and then grow this work to the number of people we're reaching out to.
Is there any criteria for homeless people moving into housing through this program? Any criteria that they have to meet to be housed?
No, this is about housing everyone who's currently unsheltered in the geographic areas that we're working with. And again, it's having those intentional conversations over days, over weeks to find out really what are the obstacles of people getting into housing and being successful in housing, and working to eliminate those obstacles. So maybe it's connections to services, maybe it's an identification card, maybe it's, they've got some financial issues on their record that makes it hard for them to get an apartment, and then working with landlords, with service providers, to really clear up those obstacles and get them moved into housing.
I think we have a couple folks on the line. Nicole Hayden from the Oregonian will go first, and then Dana from the Tribune and Camp Linford. Nicole, go ahead.
Hi, Chair Vega Pederson. Thanks for making questions available online as well. I have a few questions for you, so I'll go quick. First, I was wondering if you know how many people are unsheltered in Central City right now, and what are you considering as Central City?
Yeah, so I would say that there are likely hundreds of people that are currently unsheltered in the central city right now. And one of the aspects of Housing Multnomah Now is to establish the by name list, which is really going to help us identify and follow the people that are experiencing homelessness. So we're going to be working with our jurisdictional partners to identify the high impact zone within the central city to launch this pilot program and really looking at where we can have the impact on the most people possible. And then you had said, what is the area? So downtown, Old Town, even across this river in Central East Side, that's really the areas that we're looking at. Again, we're going to be working with folks to set up the exact geographic boundaries.
And have there been any nonprofits that have signed on already to this plan, or are you still setting up those contracts?
Yeah, so we have existing contracts with many service providers, and we've had really good conversations with them. I believe that with this housing first approach, we are going to have the partnerships that we need in order to make this happen.
Okay, so you don't need any new contracts, you're just going to ask people to center their work in this specific area?
So I'm not sure if we're going to need additional contracts or additional work. We'll take a look at that. But like I said, I think people have been really eager to engage in a way that puts housing first. And so we're going to have plenty to get started with.
Okay, and will this mimic Move-in Multnomah exactly? Like, will landlords be guaranteed funds for repairs and things like that? Or is there anything that's different from Move-in Multnomah as far as like landlord incentives?
Yeah, so one of the things that we learned when we were at Seattle is that some of the landlord incentives dollars were used to help them set aside some of the requirements they might otherwise have for somebody that they were renting to. Again, if somebody had a bankruptcy or some bad credit or even any kind of nonviolent offenses on their record that might have precluded them from being rented a house, having some set of money and also somebody who is there to help support the person getting housing to move forward. So we're going to be expanding that a bit.
Okay, so you're going to expand the support offered, and then as far as money landlords receive, they will get funding up front then instead of guaranteed like repair costs?
So they will have part of this program is to have 1 year's rent guaranteed,
Okay.
and have a landlord incentive fund to help them overcome some of the obstacles or some of the things that might have been preventing them from renting to the person.
Gotcha.
Nicole, we're gonna jump to Dana now and then Kaya from Street Roots.
Okay, you come back to me afterwards,
Sure.
once we're done?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
Hi, Chair. This is Dana Ames from the Portland Tribune. Quick question about the landlords. How many landlords stepped up in the first round, and how many will you need? What's the number that you're going to need for this goal?
Oh, that is a good question. I don't have that number.
214 from Move-in Multnomah.
Okay, great. I phoned a friend. 214 from Move-in Multnomah, and we would expect at least that many to step up. I will say that Seattle was a really excellent example of how hard they work to find landlords, how much, so one of the pieces is having a team of people that is working all the time to find available units, to making those contacts and outreach with landlords, and we'll have the same model here.
So I want to be clear, it's not 214 that you're already working with plus 214 more. Your goal is around 214-ish for this new incentive.
No, I'm sorry. 214 was what we had with Move-in Multnomah. I think the number of landlords that we are going to be working with is going to depend on the number of people that will be in the geographic area that we target, and how many units each of those landlords has available. So that's the formula, at least, that we'll use to determine how many landlords we're going to be reaching out to.
Got it. And on the Move-in Multnomah, how many people actually moved into these units, and how many of them stayed in these units in, say, 90 days after they moved in?
So we had hundreds of people move in, and because of the rent guarantee, they were able to stay. I don't have the numbers of people who might have had to move out for non-financial reasons, but we can follow up with that.
Thank you, thank you.
I wanted to clarify how this coordinates with Governor Kotek's emergency order. I noticed you use the same language of the multi-agency coordinating, I think you said group and she said team. And my understanding of that executive order with the state of emergency in the different areas around the state is that the state was going to coordinate the one locally. So I was wondering if that's shifting now from the state to the county.
No, that's a really good question, and we're trying to use the same terminology to make it less confusing when we talk about these type of groups working really intensively on a daily basis to find out what's going on. So the governor is setting up, these regional MACs all over, and the one that we're setting up, that is being set up, is one that the governor, her designee, is going to be, running, because she's very interested in what's happening in the Tri-County area. But we do have the ability, and we have had conversations about having the more county-specific ones set up, and so this is really going to be based on that model, and we'll be coordinating this part of the work that's going to be happening, as well as we'll engage with what's happening at the regional level.
So it'll feed in, so it'll essentially be a larger MAC and a smaller MAC?
That's what we're envisioning right now with this one that we're setting up here in Multnomah County, because we know that the different counties are at different places in terms of the services and the readiness to really to engage in this work. So while it's really important that we have this regional view so that we are all investing in doing what we can to address the homelessness crisis in this region, we want to make sure that in Multnomah County we are putting our resources and our team together to really have Housing Multnomah Now move forward, but also be coordinating the work throughout the rest of the county.
So I think we have, Nicole, do you want to finish up, and then if there's one or two more, and then we'll call it a Friday.
Yeah, thank you. So you mentioned working with the city's new pilot, like camping sites. I guess how will you work with that in this plan immediately, since those aren't built yet and likely won't be built once you start doing this work?
So in terms of this plan and the city sites, I think for the city sites, once they're up and running, that would be another alternative for somebody who, for whatever reason, didn't choose to go into a housing that was option for them, just like our congregate shelters and all alternative shelters would be. The separate thing that the county would be doing once they're set up is really making sure that we are providing service and access to service and connections into housing for anybody who is at those alternative shelter sites, just like we would for other people experiencing homelessness in our system.
What is the program in Seattle that this is based off of?
I have that information. So, okay, go ahead, Nicole.
Okay. Yep. If people do refuse to go to any option you offer them, will people be cited or arrested? Is that a possibility, as the city said is part of their plan?
That is not something that Multnomah County does or have jurisdiction over, so that has not been a part of the discussion for this plan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I was just curious the name of the program in Seattle that you
Oh,
basically
right.
thought of.
So it's called the Housing Command Center, and that's what the kind of group that's overseeing this on the daily basis, and that's part of their Partnership for Zero initiative, which is about decreasing homelessness throughout the region.
Okay, and we have one final.
I just wanted to see how this coordinates with the street services coordinating program that's under the mayor. I know they were sort of doing it in a small way, trying to figure out how to coordinate. Is that?
Yeah, so that is work that's still happening. And in fact, Mike Myers was one of the people who came with us to Seattle to take a look at what they were doing. So I think the table that they're setting and the way that they're being very intense in the work that they're doing is a really important part of the model. This functions a little bit differently because this is very much focused on getting people into housing and doing the work necessarily to make those connections and get that done. But it's the similar model in terms of like putting the resources together and making sure you have the right people at the table. So if issues arise, if there's something that needs to be worked on, it can be addressed immediately.
Well, everybody, thank you so much for coming in. If you have any follow-up questions, you have Dennis's contact and my contact, and we just really appreciate your time.
It looks like Dana has his hand raised.
Oh, Dana, one final? Really? Are we giving you one more? Okay.
Real quickly, and I appreciate it, how much carryover money is there from the supportive housing services measure?
So we've identified $14 million that we're going to be using for this project. And you owe Dennis a favor since he got you the last one.
Oh, I owe you several.
Yeah.
No.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.